Which 4 are you putting in that playoff?
Okay, are we doing a men and women here?
Sure, why not?
Okay, because the women's one was super easy for me. The men,
Okay.
I've got a bunch of crosses. The men, I've got one. I know who Alabama is, in terms
Okay.
of they're always going to be there. The men, I've
Yes.
got Roman. The other 3 spots are up for grabs, right?
Okay.
So we could get to that one in a moment. So I realize I probably left out some, but for the women, I immediately wrote down Mercedes, Britt, Charlotte, and Becky.
Okay.
And I could probably, like, as much as I would love to do a 4 horsewoman thing here,
Sure.
I don't know, as much as I have enjoyed her character work and as much as I've enjoyed them hinting that she may be out of the group she started in WWE right now. I just don't know if Bayley, with the knee injuries she's had in her career, if she can go the way she used to when she put on the banger of a match against Mercedes/Sasha in NXT all those years ago. But it also could be a situation where they're just protecting her, because I
Right.
once thought the same thing of Sami Zayn, where Sammy was doing all those goofier characters, and it's like, well, they're not really letting him go. Is he okay? And now that, ever since he was into the bloodline, like, he's put on some really good matches. So it could be a thing where they're protecting her and eventually they let her go again. But as of right now, I think those would be my 4.
I that's the thing with Bayley. I feel like we're still forgetting what she can do. Like, I think it's been so long since we've
Yeah.
seen those 60 minutes and things like that. We're forgetting. Like, I would have her in mind. I'd have Becky there also. The other 2, Bianca, and from the AEW world, I go Tony. Like,
Okay.
what Toni Storm is doing right now, like, yes, there's character, but we know she can go in the ring also, which last night
Yeah.
just proved that again. Like, I'd put her in there.
Yeah. Which, by the way, just such a great touch of using the resources available to you, by using the guy who does the intro to the Turner Classic Movies, like, to introduce Toni Storm. Like, fantastic. I mean, I'm a little disappointed he didn't say the entire catchphrase. He just
Sure.
went chin up and watch for the shoe. But at the same time, that man's a professional. Probably
Right.
shouldn't be saying tits out. Probably shouldn't be doing it. So, tip of the cap to that, in the introduction to Toni Storm last night. I
Also,
guess,
the production of the black and white in match, like the flip to do
yes.
that in match, like an extra touch last night. Like, everything she is doing right now is a home run.
Yeah, and Toni can go. I mean, I guess I look at her more as character work. Same thing with, like, Io Sky, Bianca Belair,
Sure.
Jamie Hayter. I mean, I know she's
Yeah.
injured right now, but that's another woman that I kind of considered for that list. Like, I wrote down those 4 names right away, thinking, okay, this is probably it. Then jotted down some other women's names. Kairi Sane could probably be part of
Sure.
that when she, again, kind of shows everybody what she can do now that she's back in WWE. But those were the 4 that I still initially wrote down.
The other
were
woman I
those
would
4.
throw in there, and from a college football standpoint, I feel like she'd be the group of 5 team that is competitive and is undefeated and maybe has an upset. And you're like, do they deserve to be in with 4 teams? And ultimately they get screwed over because that's what the 4 team is Willow. Like, I know we haven't seen that big win yet outside of the weird Mercedes one, but Willow, every time she's in there, she just performs. She's entertaining, and I feel like she needs a bigger stage.
Yeah, I feel like I want to like Willow more than I do. And maybe that's just
Okay.
TV time. That
Sure.
and very honestly, that could just be TV time and the lack thereof, and going back to the way that outside of Toni Storm and really, I guess at this point, really outside of Toni,
Sky
it's
Blue's on
tough.
TV a lot right now.
Yeah, she's been on TV a lot. Well, because she's been involved now with Toni Storm. She was also involved with some of the House of Black stuff.
Sure.
So she's been kind of floating between the 2 stories, that the only 2 stories they're willing to tell on women for the women AEW right now is their 2 champions. So maybe it's a lack of TV time for Willow that just doesn't have me as hot. So who did you have as your 4 for the women?
So my 4 were Toni Storm.
I may be
Becky,
putting
Bayley.
you. I understand I'm putting you on the spot where I wrote all this stuff down, and I'm like, hey, let's do a women's one. So
Toni, Becky, Bayley, and Bianca.
Okay, which is fair. Fair. I just feel like you have to have a Charlotte. Like, to me, to defend the Charlotte pick. Like, as
she sort of feels like the Bama, like you said, where it's like, are they actually good, or are we just going off name right now?
Well, but she still is good. Like, she's still one of the few women willing to climb to the top of a cage in War Games and do a moonsault off the top. Like,
but she never hits it. Like, that's the thing. She goes up there and then misses it. Like, I feel like that War Games one is the most she's ever hit that moonsault.
Yeah, well, again, it helps when you have that many women below you. Like, it kind of helps, but the fact that she's willing to do it, and she just, again, I understand maybe we're sick of Charlotte constantly being around, but yeah, I just don't know if you can have a tournament without her. The men's side is a lot more difficult.
Yes.
Roman is the 1 seed.
Roman's in, yes. I think that's a guarantee.
After that,
Do you have to go MJF as, Power 5 conference champ? Because they never get left out of playoffs.
Yeah. So you're not bitter at all.
No,
As
no.
the resident Florida State fan who was watching a Florida State game during a pro wrestling show in Chicago earlier this year, I wrote down MJF, and I don't know if it's guaranteed. Like especially because he's been champ for over a year.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of feels like he has to be, and I think ultimately he's going to be there. Like, to me, he's probably Texas at this point. If we're drawing the parallel of ultimately they probably have to be there because they beat Bama, and
Sure.
they've got the 1 loss, but I think MJF ultimately has to be there. But I'd be open to hearing arguments to counter that, I guess.
I think he's it. I think as the champion, that's what they are. I think Roman MJF were the 2 where I was like, all right, they have to be in. Because then after that, it's wide open.
So I am going to just, the names that I just jotted down, let me know if I missed somebody for consideration for these last 2. Cody, Punk, Danielson, Omega, Sammy, Gunther, Seth, Mox, and because I'm me, Vikingo.
Okay. So
Vikingo's like Cincinnati, right? Like he's the group of 5 team that, like, if everybody else beats each other up,
sure,
he can sneak into that 4 spot.
The 2 that didn't hear you mention that I would throw in there also, just based on right now, Swerve and what he's doing, and Ospreay.
Sure.
Bruv, like, how do you leave Ospreay out?
Yeah, that's true. That's on me.
Yeah. So those are, everyone else, I agree with.
Okay.
Maybe not Vikingo,
I think Swerve probably still has a little more work to do.
Okay.
I think everybody else I listed probably has a better body of work, while there might not be somebody hotter than Swerve right now.
Sure.
Like, Swerve's the hot
I will say, yes. And like we talked about a little bit last week where Raw might end up under that Warner umbrella. Maybe we see some sort of crossover. Like, how cool would this be if at the end of the year, like, somehow these companies are working together? And obviously there'd be a lot of ego checking to get involved to make this happen. But just to do something like this with both companies, like, that would draw some numbers.
Oh, you think?
Yeah.
You think? Like, I think it'd be able to do pretty well for it. Okay. So I had initially written down before I started, like, scribbling and crossing everything off. My initial 4 were Roman, MJF, Mox, and Seth.
Okay.
And then I crossed it all off because, like, I'm also thinking, like, oh, how can you leave off Cody? How can I leave off Danielson or Omega? But, like, the reason why I initially gravitated towards those 2 is because even though Roman's been the champ for 3 years, even though MJF is been the champ for a year, Mox and Seth are the 2 flag bearers for their respective companies right now. Like, they're the workhorses that anytime you need something, those guys are there for you.